presidential limousine that the Secret Service calls the Beast is being brought around for the new president. The car is essentially an Abrams tank in Cadillac clothing. It's really not any car that General Motors builds. It's not a modification of an existing vehicle. It is designed from the ground up to be the limousine of the President of the United States. Mr. Trump was riding around in it earlier today without the seal of the President on the door, but of course, since noon today, the seal has been placed on the car for him. Norah O'Donnell is on the National Mall where all of this has been unfolding. Norah?
We just saw what I think is one of the most beautiful parts of the inaugural parade, and that, of course, is the pass and review, watching the finest and bravest in our country pass by and salute their commander-in-chief. And as you noted, Scott, now he gets into this incredible limousine that is known as the Beast, where I'm told that the president can't even open it from the inside because the doors are so heavy. But this will begin the inaugural parade, and according to President Trump's advisors, this is going to be one of a shorter parade, only 90 minutes, in part because they say they want this to be a workmanlike inauguration, that he wants to get started and get to the White House. But the pomp and ceremony that goes on with this inauguration is just about to get underway, as there are some, I think, 8,000 participants that have come from all across this country to participate in this parade.
Norah O'Donnell of CBS this morning. Norah, thank you very much. We were concerned that there was going to be rain all day in Washington today, and it really hasn't come down much. There's just a sprinkling of rain. Not enough to spoil this parade. It's not going to rain on the parade, so to speak, best we can tell at this point, which may mean that the new president and the First Lady will walk part of the way. It's 47 degrees in Washington right now. Pretty nice day for January the 20th. I'm reminded that Ronald Reagan had both the warmest and coldest inaugurations in history, 55 degrees and 7 degrees in his second inaugural. When it was 7 degrees and the wind was blowing, they decided to move everything inside, and he was sworn in the rotunda of the Capitol and not outside.
You know, Scott, your description of that being basically a tank in disguise is exactly right. It reminded me of something I hadn't thought of in years. When President Ford was president, he was up campaigning in Connecticut, and some kids were coming home from a movie or something and hit the presidential limo broadside, and the car just bounced off. Nobody was hurt, thankfully.
The president's limousine surrounded by and driven by what the Secret Service calls the PPD, the Presidential Protection Detail. They're going to make their way off the Capitol grounds, come on to Pennsylvania Avenue, then it's a couple of miles drive down Pennsylvania Avenue, and then a little bit of a dogleg to get back onto Pennsylvania Avenue right in front of the White House. You know, I'm reminded that Pennsylvania Avenue in front of the White House used to be a thoroughfare that people drove through, and then after the bombing of the building in Oklahoma City, the federal government realized that the White House could be damaged by a truck bomb in that same location, so they cut it off and made it a pedestrian mall. Fran Townsend, tell us a little bit about the security precautions for the parade on this rather short trip to the White House.
You know, Scott, one of the wonderful things about it is, regardless of who the new president is, this has been practiced and practiced and practiced. So this is a national security special event. That means that so for example, the temporary flight restriction that is always over the Capitol and the White House is expanded to give the Air Force more time to respond if there was an errant plane. The military district of Washington works very closely with the Secret Service to make sure that they're fully integrated, along with the Washington Metropolitan Police Department, who, as you saw in earlier images, is covering the protests that are on the outskirts. There are perimeters of security that start quite far out. We know it in the media. Just getting to the National Mall this morning before dawn took a long time. The inspections were quite intrusive, and actually, I thought unprecedented this year. So umbrellas, if they weren't collapsible, were taken away and confiscated. Aerosol sprays were not permitted. Small bottles of water, the bottles had to be small. And I think that was an anticipation of not only terrorist threats, but the domestic sort of protests that we saw this afternoon during the lunch.
And as you could see in that picture, not even the most powerful man in the world can avoid the DMV. The automobile has Washington, D.C. license plates, and his license plate is number 1.
So right now they're assembling the security forces to prepare for because it changes, the posture changes when the president is actually making that trip from the Capitol to the White House, and they're making sure they've paused for a moment to make sure everything's in place. We hear helicopters here overhead. They will remain overhead. There'll be civilian air patrols in the air by the local National Guard unit, and all of that is an umbrella of security that covers the National Capital Region while the president is in motion down Pennsylvania Avenue.
And the 2 men in the front seat of the car are both Secret Service agents who've been specifically and rigorously trained in the systems that the car has in terms of defense, and trained in driving in any kind of situation.
It's completely sealed off, Scott,
from the outside air.
That's exactly right.
In case someone should try a gas attack.
And of course, all of those men and women standing around who are in the Secret Service would give it all to save the president.
I mean, they have trained for every contingency. So in the event of an attack on the parade on Pennsylvania Avenue, exactly how and where the air assets would come in to evacuate him is practiced. They've timed it. They know exactly how to do it and where they would take him.
There is the parade route. That's Pennsylvania Avenue there, and there's going to be a little dog leg down here. He's going to drive by his new hotel, and then a dog leg on 15th Street, back onto Pennsylvania Avenue, and right in front of his new residence, moving into federal public housing. And a large review stand has been built there. The president, the first lady, the vice president, and his wife will be sitting in the review stand with other dignitaries, and then they will watch the entire parade go by. There's the review stand already filling up. Looks like a bunch of blankets being brought down there. But again, it's 47 degrees, which is a pretty nice day in Washington. There's Pennsylvania Avenue. Large crowds on both sides of the street, but maybe even more security people on both sides of the street. You can see the no man's land between the security people and the large crowds of people who are there to watch the president go by. And among the people standing by, waiting for the president to come down the parade route, is our very own Jan Crawford. Jan?
Well, Scott, we're here right by the Russell Senate Office building across the street from the Capitol. The presidential escort, which you just saw that President Trump reviewing those troops, has started making the march down the street. And then we will be just in front of the president as he starts this parade route. There's going to be about 8,000 people following President Trump and the First Lady. And of course, we're going to be expecting him at some point, as the rain is holding off for now, to get out like presidents typically have done in years past. The parade's going to be about 1.5 miles long. It shouldn't take more than 30 to 45 minutes, depending on whether or not he decides to get out and take a little stroll down Pennsylvania Avenue. But so far, the weather is holding off, and the people are lining up to march.
Hats off to Jan Crawford. Thank you very much, Jan. Appreciate that very much. Hats on for Jan Crawford. It's a beautiful hat. And it looks like we've lost the feed there just for a moment. That'll happen from time to time. You see the white van there. That's a camera crew, and they'll have a electronic link that links the video back to the broadcast facilities. And every once in a while we lose the signal, but not all that often these days.
And he will be going past Trump Hotel.
He will be going past his hotel, which just opened recently. It is the historic old post office building, a 19th century building, one of the tallest buildings in Washington. And he has turned that into a luxury hotel, and it's just steps away from the White House. Fran, as we are watching this, security-wise, what do we not see?
Oh, so behind this, there is an incredible information and operations center that is sort of controlling all of the many moving pieces. I talked about air assets. There are ground assets. I talked about there's the Secret Service, the military, the local police. There's we have intelligence assets feeding into this in case there are any threats. And so NSA and FBI, all those command centers are up and running, and they're all feeding into the event command center so that everyone has a real-time and fully integrated picture of the threat, and they have the situational awareness about where the president is and any threats that he may have to confront.
And we can presume that there's air cover overhead.
Civilian air patrols are in place. We can hear the helicopters overhead right now. Absolutely, and they will remain, the air assets will remain up there and in place until he is safely at the White House.
Now, there have been protests since the inauguration. There's been a little bit of violence. About 95 people, at least at this point, have been arrested by the Metropolitan Police. Some windows have been broken. Pepper spray has been used. This is distant from where the parade is proceeding down the street. But our Anna Werner is down there on the parade route, and she's telling us that she can actually hear those protests around the corner. Anna?
Scott, that's right. I'm in front of the Trump Hotel. That's what you see across the street, with many of President Trump's fans and supporters waiting for his motorcade to come down through the parade. But where you can't see, off to my left, just a little ways down there, we've been able to hear for several hours today. They've been there all day, a very vocal group of protesters. So if President Trump decides to stop here to say hello to staff members of the hotel who are actually out there on the steps, who've been holding banners up today saying, "Thank you, Mr. Trump," if he chooses to stop and get out, roll down the window, in all likelihood, he is going to hear those protesters saying things like, "Not my president," like they've been chanting all day, Scott.
Anna Werner, thank you very much. Now, Andy Card, as we have watched all of this over the last several hours, the Oval Office has been redecorated. It has been repainted and redecorated
all over
in just a few hours.
President Obama probably had his last visit to the Oval Office a little bit before President-elect Trump came over for tea and crumpets. And then a team from the General Services Administration, the janitors of the government, came in and painted the walls, changed the rugs maybe, took the pictures down, set up the Oval Office the way the new president would want it to be, put his family pictures on the tables behind the desk. I'm assuming they're going to use the Resolute desk, although I don't know that. But it will all be done over to look spectacular. I'll never forget the first time I walked into the Oval Office before President George W. Bush entered it the first time as being president, and it was breathtaking to see the transformation in that sanctuary of democracy that it's called the Oval Office.
The Resolute desk is called the Resolute desk because it was a gift from Queen Victoria to the President of the United States, and it was built from the timbers of the HMS Resolute, a British vessel.
It was rescued by Americans, refitted, and presented back to the British.
It had been stuck in the Arctic, if I remember correctly, and rescued, as you said, by American vessels. President Bush used the Resolute desk, FDR used the Resolute desk, President Kennedy used the Resolute desk, and there may be many others as well.
There are. And the most famous picture in the Oval Office was actually of John Kennedy peering out of the door in the front of that desk.
It seems to me they're kind of slow getting going here. Do you suppose something is not going according to plan?
The pace is very slow.
The pace is slow, but I will admit, usually they don't like to stop the motorcade. Once it starts, it doesn't stop. But they were stopped for quite a while, so there must have been some communication back and forth. And it may have had to do with the parade, not with security.
Right. No, it could easily have had to do with having the parade, right, get them all lined up and ready to go. Although that's typically, you've got hours to do that while he's at lunch. And the pace is a little off. I don't know.
You know, we were talking about the Resolute desk. Somebody stopped me, but the seal of the president is on the front of the desk, and FDR had that placed there in what would be the knee hole of the desk, so that people could not see that he was wearing braces for his polio.
That's right.
And it's been there ever since, and many presidents have used the Resolute desk. You know, there was a picture earlier today that I'd like to try to recall. President Obama was caught, if you will, by a camera that was in the Rose Garden as he was making one of his last trips to the Oval Office. And he was taking a letter that he had written for the incoming president and putting it on the Resolute desk so that when the incoming president, Mr. Trump, walked into the Oval Office, the first thing that he would see on the top of the desk would be a letter from President Obama, probably a letter of welcome and a letter of advice. It's a tradition that has been going on many years.
It's a wonderful tradition, and reading those letters demonstrates the empathy that an outgoing president has for the incoming president, and the commitment of support.
Here's the picture now. There's the president walking into the Oval Office and leaving the letter on the desk.
I actually think they put it in the drawer.
In the drawer.
After they sign they'll actually also
sign the drawer.
Right.
And put the letter in there.
Sign the drawer itself.
Correct.
Sign the drawer itself.
Correct. As does the vice president at his desk sign the drawer, and so you can look at it.
And you'll notice that the ladder is already in there. They're getting work done in there.
They're tearing the place down while the president's still in there. And imagine what the inside of that drawer must look like with the signatures of the president there. Right. And we don't know what is in the letter that President Obama left for Donald Trump. Perhaps President Trump will share that with us at a certain point. Now they're making their way down the parade route where Jan Crawford is. Jan?
Well, Scott, it may seem like we're going at a leisurely pace, but that's because the troops that we saw President Trump reviewing are actually marching in front of this parade. It's the presidential escort. It's members of the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department, and all of the branches of the armed forces are right there marching in front of us. And then, of course, you can see the motorcade right behind us here with President Trump and the First Lady coming down the street. We will hit right up here, begin to turn on Pennsylvania Avenue, and then make that drive to the White House. But there are people, crowds of people lined up here in support of President Trump. We've, of course, heard about the protests, but we have not heard them here. We see people cheering. There's a child waving an American flag on her father's shoulders. Everyone videoing with their cell phones, of course. So now we have some people chanting Trump, holding signs, all greeting. I mean, this is really kind of the first big crowds of people that President Trump will see. I mean, this is almost since he's taken the oath of office and met there with members of Congress and leaders. Now he is seeing the people, and these are supporters who put him into the White House. Scott?
Speaking of hats, most presidents for many years wore top hats to their inauguration, but it was President Eisenhower who decided to wear a fedora, which apparently really got under the skin of President Truman. He did not want to wear a fedora, but he finally gave in at the last minute and wore the common man's hat, because that is what Dwight Eisenhower wanted to do during his inauguration.
And you know, it was the Kennedy brothers who killed the hat business in America for men, because you know, we were getting to the stage where men started blow drying their hair and getting these expensive haircuts, and you put on a hat and it kind of messed it up and so forth, and Kennedy didn't like to wear any hat, and after that was about it for hats.
Now we're hearing the cheer of the crowds as the presidential limousine proceeds. We would expect, if tradition is any guide, the limousine to stop at a certain point and the new president and first lady get out and walk part of the way. President Obama very much enjoyed that during his inauguration.
Scott, the Secret Service would have given the new president advice about the place along the parade route best suited from a security perspective for him to do that. And I would guess, assuming that the Trump Hotel is in that zone, somewhere near the middle is the easiest from a security perspective, that that's where I would look for him to get out.
That's my guess.
Yeah.
And that's generally where presidents have gotten out, somewhere along there.
And it's from a security perspective the easiest for them to protect. It's the most inside the multiple perimeters.
Well, you talked about the Resolute desk. President George H.W. Bush did not use the Resolute desk in the Oval Office. He did use it in the office upstairs in the residence.
The president's private office.
The private office.
Most people don't realize that the Oval Office is preferred by some presidents, but other presidents like to use a private office in the White House and just use the Oval for ceremonial events. You know, Jan Crawford, as you're rolling along with the motorcade there, give me a sense of the sight and the sounds. Tell me about the people that you're seeing.
Well, Scott, the crowds are actually getting larger as we progress toward Pennsylvania Avenue, and all that we've seen so far are Trump supporters waving small American flags, waving red Make America Great Again hats, taking them off their head and waving them around. But, you know, I'm also struck by the high level of security that we see here. The crowds are quite a significant distance back off the road behind two metal barricades, police officers facing the crowds, and then we are being escorted on foot by Secret Service. So there is a high security presence here. But these crowds that are greeting President Trump are very enthusiastic. These are supporters. These are the people that sent him to Washington to change things, to shake things up. That's who's here right now to greet him as he makes his way to the White House. These are his supporters. These are the people who sent him there. And this is really the first time that he is seeing the public as president of the United States.
Does everyone have their cell phone up and videoing this moment?
Well, we see quite a few. We definitely see a lot of people trying to kind of get a video of this moment. Now, they're anxiously awaiting President Trump, who is probably right now about, I'm terrible at estimating, I'd say half a football field. How about that, Scott? Or maybe about a third of a football field behind us right now. So they're anxiously awaiting him, you know, as he rolls by. So they've got their cell phones ready, kind of peering down to see where he is and where he's going to be coming. But, you know, we just see a lot of signs, children, people of all ages, people holding their Trump signs. But, yeah, a lot of cell phones to get a shot of this moment as President Trump gets onto Pennsylvania Avenue, which is right now we are turning onto Pennsylvania Avenue, the Capitol, of course, in the background, and the motorcade here getting ready to turn onto Pennsylvania Avenue with the other end, the White House.
Can we switch back to the Jan Mobile? I want everyone to see. There it is. That's the Jan Mobile. That's our version of the presidential limousine. That's Jan on the back of the truck with the TV lights there.
Yeah, we like this.
She's rolling right along with the rest of the motorcade.
Oh, wait, where are you? Oh, back here. Yeah. I see you guys.
Say, Jan,
yeah.
What we hear...
I can hear you, but I can't see you. I know where you are, though.
We can hear all the crowd noise behind you. What are some of the things that people are shouting?
Right now they're saying Trump, 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 Trump. I mean, it is a unison, kind of an eruption of joy. They know that the president is about to pass them, so there's a lot of anticipation at this moment. A lot of happy faces and just it's a lot of excitement, because this is when they're going to be seeing the candidate, the man that won the presidency. This will be their first look, at least in the car, at the president now, the new president of the United States.
Fran Townsend, how is this crowd vetted from a security standpoint? Are these people who were handpicked, or is just taking all comers?
Scott, this is America's parade. This is the country's parade. And so, no, the people that you see lining the Pennsylvania Avenue are not vetted, per se. But what they are is they've gone through at least 2 and some 3 checkpoints, and at different points in their journey during the day. And so all of them have been searched, magnetometers, all of it.
You're watching live CBS News coverage of the inauguration of the 45th president. Welcome back to CBS News coverage of the 45th President of the United States in that limousine right there with the First Lady as they proceed down Pennsylvania Avenue toward the White House. We are expecting to see Donald Trump and his wife step out of the limousine at a certain point and walk part of the parade route. The President was administered the oath of office by the Chief Justice of the United States at noon today.
The President of the United States, and the First Lady, Melania Trump.
You know, Andy Card, Chief of Staff to President George W. Bush, it seems to me that presidents always come to Washington to change history, and history always changes them.
I think it is both. They do. Every president leaves a stamp on history. They do change, but I do think presidents have changed much more than they thought they would be by serving as presidents. And a lot has to do because of the sacrifices people make around them. They are very moved by the American people, and especially those that step up and say, "I will serve." So the call to noble service is an important call for the president to acknowledge, recognize, and reward.
That was never taken for granted by George W. Bush.
Never. He greatly appreciated anyone who served, whether it was as a staffer at the White House or on the front lines of a military battle in Iraq or Afghanistan. He was completely grateful for the service that people gave to this country.
And you know, I have heard him say at times when, you know, he was being heavily criticized, and he would say, "Look, nobody made me do this." He recognized that was part of the job, and it was very, very tough.
Well, he had phenomenal parents who inculcated him with the call to noble service for our country, and he certainly has lived it.
And the parade is passing, as you can see there, the Canadian Embassy, which is right there along Pennsylvania Avenue. Anna Werner is also down with the crowd as the parade approaches her location. Anna?
You can see Trump supporters who are pressed up against these barricades here, and they are very excited. You can feel that excitement, but I got to tell you, you can also hear what a moment ago was an undercurrent of boos coming from the protesters, and I can still hear them chanting a little bit even as the band over here starts marching by and playing, Scott. So the question is President Trump going to get out in front of the hotel, and what are we going to hear out of these crowds? Will the supporters drown out the protesters?
Sort of nice to see a little kid.
It is.
You know what I mean? And he's acting like a little kid in the car.
And we're
Yeah, we just moved in.
watching the parade move along on Pennsylvania Avenue. And we're reminded that also in the car with the president is his young son, Barron. So you have the president, the first lady, and Barron in the presidential limousine. It has been a very long time since we had a young son in the White House. Not since John Kennedy have we had a young man in the White House. You see the U.S. Capitol there in the background and the big crowds lining both sides of Pennsylvania Avenue. Joining us just now is Bob Woodward of the Washington Post, legendary reporter of the Washington Post. Bob, I'm interested in your impression of the president's inaugural speech today.
Yeah, it was a surprise, and as Bob Schieffer was saying, he took the hide off everyone, and what it is, it's a speech for the people who elected him. It was a campaign speech, not an inaugural speech. But you've got to remember that where Trump comes from, he's a deal guy. He spent his life making deals, and in this case, what's happened, this is his opening bid. I'm going to stick with the people who voted for me, and then they will negotiate. I think the other side of this is where he comes from, a culture, a business culture of exaggeration, where it's acceptable to exaggerate, and he is known to call producers or reporters who've done a story, say on job creation, and that he's saying provably that the numbers don't hold up, and he calls and he said, no, wait a minute, come on, I'm trying to do the right thing, I'm trying to get jobs, don't get hung up on the specifics. So but this speech was a jolt, and I think to lots of people, even his own supporters, there was a sense of where's the outreach. Then in the luncheon, he said nice things about Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton. That might have gone in the inaugural address.
The presidential limousine just passed the museum right there. You see it on the left of the screen. In monumental letters on the side of the museum is inscribed the First Amendment to the Constitution, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, my favorite part, the freedom of the press, all carved in stone. That tower that you see there on the right, that's Donald Trump's new hotel on Pennsylvania Avenue. That is the old U.S. Post Office building, a 19th century building. There had been plans at various times to demolish it, but they have refurbished it now into the new Trump Hotel, and he's terribly proud of that, and he'll be driving by there shortly. And Bob Schieffer has money that is where Donald Trump will get out of the car and walk part of the way.
That's generally where presidents, when they decide to get out of the limo, they generally are in that vicinity. And I think, Fran, you pointed out it's one of the safest places you can kind of protect better there, because it's the way it's surrounded by buildings.
That's right, Bob. And I will tell you, while it always seems sort of a sudden spur-of-the-moment decision where the president gets out, it's not at all. He's discussed this with the Secret Service, and they have snipers in place. There's a whole panoply of security measures in that area, and they kind of agree, if you're going to get out, this is the stretch where you'll get out, and then they pre-deploy assets there. And so it's actually quite scripted. He can, of course, decide not to get out if there's inclement weather or it's cold, but it's pretty scripted where his zone is if he wants to get out and walk.
47 degrees for our Jan Crawford is right now in the parade. Jan?
Well, we are seeing a lot of protesters. We are approaching it right in front of the National Archives. This is a major protest to greet President Trump. We saw a few signs earlier in this parade route, but now these crowds here are all protesting the new president. Everyone carrying signs like "My President," "Impeach Comrade Trump," "Impeach Trump," shouting.
Ladies and gentlemen,
we heard some boos earlier.
Vice President
but nothing like this. This is an organized crowd. And you can hear the boos now, see the signs, no Trump. Everyone really is carrying a sign. I see very few Trump supporters here. We are, of course, across the street from the National Archives and just approaching the FBI and the Justice Department in this stretch of Pennsylvania Avenue.
Jan, how long does that stretch of protesters go? Are you still seeing it unfold?
It's about half a block. It's about half a block, I would say, on both sides of the street, but mainly concentrated on the north side across from the National Archives, Scott. And it is a loud group, as I'm sure you could see. Many people holding signs, and now a heavy security presence with police officers and various law enforcement personnel. So the enthusiastic Trump supporters starting the beginning of the parade, I would say kind of wedged in the middle there, were a significant group of anti-Trump protesters.
Earlier
and now
today,
you hear boos. I can know if you can hear the boos. These are people who are booing us as members of the news media. And they're shouting USA and Trump. So some of the boos, don't assume they're all for President Trump. A lot of the boos that we're hearing are as the news crews roll by to report on this parade.
well, I hope they'll enjoy our coverage if they see
Trump.
it later.
Nothing new here,
Sorry.
Bob Woodward.
That is true.
Earlier today, we were seeing some violent protests distant from the parade route. A few blocks away, there were windows that were smashed by protesters who had come looking for trouble. They were armed with hammers to smash windows with, and the Metropolitan Police went after them with pepper spray and flashbang concussion grenades to disperse those crowds. We're told that there have been at least 95 arrests, but again, that was a few blocks away from the scene that you see here. So no violence of any kind along this parade route, but certainly getting into the thick of the protesters who have come to make their voices heard along Pennsylvania Avenue. Bob Woodward, a polarizing speech at the inauguration, a polarizing candidate and president for this country.
Yes, and of course all of us in the media kind of thought, oh, Trump can never get the nomination, Trump can never win, and he did. So there's some strategy behind this that we probably are not aware of. What interests me in watching this is the parade and the pomp of the presidency, and there's been some criticism that Trump and his team are not doing enough to find out what really the presidency is about, not reading memos, not having contact. I had the time to do a little reporting, and there's much more strategy. They are worrying about not the above the line, but below the line. And big issue is Putin and Russia. What's the relationship that Trump has, and what are his goals with Putin and Russia? And there's this outreach which has been criticized so much, and if you dig into this a little bit, you find that Trump and his team have a two-track strategy. They are going to reach out, try to work with Putin, but they also... There he goes.
And we see the Secret Service agents getting out, which we suspect means that the next person we see is going to be the President, the First Lady, and their young son.
And Bob Schieffer was absolutely right. This is now between the Justice Department and the FBI is on your left, the Justice Department's on your right, and it's just before the next big building you're going to see on your right-hand side is Trump Tower. So I hope you didn't bet, Scott, because Bob Schieffer won that.
Let's watch and listen for just a moment.
Melania Trump may set the record here for the tallest shoes by a First Lady walking in the inaugural parade here.
Well, she looks fabulous.
Oh, she looks gorgeous.
She is stunning, and the young son, I'll bet that never happened to you, Bob Schieffer, when you were a teenager.
No, it never did. And I was just watching Jan Crawford. You know, this is my 14th inaugural, and I never got to do what Jan did and is doing, is ride in the parade. I always thought that would be a great assignment.
Well, let's go down to Jan, who is right there among it all.
And Bob, I was thinking, I hope that I get this assignment in 4 years. You can see the crowds cheering. I mean, there are no protesters around this vantage point where the President and the First Lady have decided to take a stroll down Pennsylvania Avenue. As Nora said, they got out right across the street from the Justice Department, and now we are approaching the Trump Hotel. And again, all we see right now are supporters. I know Anna had said she could hear some protesters from in the distance, but the crowds now appear to be drowning out those protesters as President Trump and the First Lady make their way down Pennsylvania Avenue, approaching the Trump Hotel. Scott.
Let's switch over to Anna Werner now, Jan. Anna, what are you seeing from your vantage point?
Well, we can see the President Trump and his family watching here, and this crowd is going crazy. They're really excited. However, just now, I'm hearing the chants, one chant on my right, USA, USA, boos, and some Not My President chants on the left. These groups have been trying to drown each other out all day long, and here comes President Trump in front of the Trump International Hotel. He's approaching toward the crowd with Melania and his family, waving at the crowd now. Everybody here has a smartphone. They're all taking video and pictures. He's waving at people at the hotel, and now it looks like he's getting back in the car. So a lot of people here got to see exactly what they wanted to see, Scott, which was a glimpse of President Donald Trump right here in front of them on the street.
Well, a glimpse is about all we got. It's a very short walk for President Trump.
Yeah.
Jimmy Carter walked the entire way to the White House from the Capitol. No other president has done that since then, but usually the walks are a good deal longer than that. That tower that you see there is the Trump International Hotel, and Jan Crawford is right there in front of it. Jan?
Well, Scott, remember, we are just in front of the president, and it may be well timed that he decided to get back into that car because there is a large group of protesters just across the street from the Trump Hotel. He will not be walking. He's back in the car. He will not be walking past these protesters. There are a few Trump supporters mixed in, unlike the last group of people that we saw, but a lot of signs, very anti-Trump, some of them quite crude, and you can see and hear these crowds now. So President Trump and the First Lady took a short stroll, but did get back in that car just in time, I would think, from their perspective, before these next group of protesters that will greet them. Scott?
Bob Woodward.
Real quickly, if you saw the Secret Service man tap President Trump and we're getting back in the car now. Knowing Trump a little, I am sure his impulse would be to go to the hotel and hand out fruit plates as guests registered to make some sort of commercial contact. And the Secret Service said, back in the car, and he did, and I'm sure he didn't like that.
Well, as you know, they say in PR, they got the money shot. They got the picture of him in front of the Trump Hotel. That's what the photographers would say. But I think the Secret Service was probably wise in saying maybe it's time to get back in where it's warm and dry.
They're getting quite close to the White House now. They're going to make a right turn on 15th Street and then connect back up with Pennsylvania Avenue as it crosses in front of the White House, and they're just a few blocks away at this point. The sights and sounds of Inauguration Day.
And if I could say, right when this idea of a two-track approach to Russia and Putin. I think this is really important. This is on the agenda, and as he said in his inaugural address, he's going to build up the military, and so he's going to do things that Putin hates. So he's going to be giving him a left jab and then reaching out with the hand, okay, let's work together, let's do things. And, you know, this is grand strategy stuff. Whether it works, we will see. But there's more to it than a kind of naive, oh, we're going to join Putin on everything.
Bob, what do you think his strategy toward the press will be? All this talk about moving the briefing room to someplace else. I mean, other presidents have held briefings in the old executive office building. Nothing new about that.
You know, Trump has a love-hate relationship with the press, as you know, and he condemns us, and then if you want to talk to him about something, he very often will do it. Now, whether that's the case as president, we are going to see, and this clearly marks a demarcation line here, because now it's not just words. He's going to have to make decisions and do things, and that is going to define him and his presidency, not everything that went before, including that inaugural address.
As the new president begins to approach the White House, Chip Reed is covering for us down there. Chip?
Yeah, Scott, this is an interesting crowd. I know you've had kind of blocks of protesters and then blocks of supporters in other areas, but here we've got a real mixture. You've got people, a lot of people with Make America Great Again hats standing right next to people with signs saying Trump equals swastika and things like that. So you've really got an interesting mix of people, some cheering, some booing and screaming and saying four-letter words, all standing right next to each other and treating each other fairly cordially, by the way. There really has been no pushing and shoving or any kind of obvious disagreeableness, but people standing right next to each other and vehemently disagreeing with each other in how they react to President Trump. Scott?
Chip Reed, thank you, Chip. Well, it's been a little bit less cordial in other parts of Washington. There were protests earlier, and now we have our Jeff Pegues, as you see right there. There seems to be a fire as well. Jeff, what are you seeing?
Yeah, Scott, we're in one of the protest zones at 13th and K, and you see right over here, you see this limo. This was one of the vehicles that was vandalized earlier, and now someone has set it on fire, and I am concerned that this car, well, it could go up in flames even further. But you see, the crowd is growing here. There's no sense of structure to what's going on, and now we see the police moving in. Finally, we see the police moving in to take control, because I wonder how fast they can get the fire department over here to put this fire out. Because if it intensifies, there's a really good chance that this car could... Here we go. Here we go. They're moving the crowd back. They're moving the crowd back. We're going with them. Police have their gear, they have their pepper spray, and they're trying to control the crowd. But frankly, this is something that is perhaps long overdue, because for several minutes now, this crowd has just been building here. They've been kicking in the windows of these vehicles over my shoulder, and then finally someone set the limo on fire.
Jeff, have you seen or heard about anyone being hurt?
No, not yet. But we know that there have been about 95 arrests. Some police officers have been injured. But here at 13th and K, in the last hour or so, we have not seen anyone injured. However, that could change. You just notice police with the pepper spray, and over that line of police we see the fire engine, the fire truck finally coming to the scene, because they're going to try to get this fire under control. Scott?
And the police officers have to make the area secure for the firemen to be able to do their work. Fran Townsend, when your job is protecting the president, protests like this are a problem because they're a massive distraction for the security forces.
That's exactly right. But I will tell you, I was speaking yesterday with a member of the Washington Metropolitan Police Department, and they're really taking the primary responsibility for the protests because that's outside the bubble. Let's remember, we have it on a split screen. This is several blocks away from where the president's inaugural parade is. And so the local Metropolitan Police Department takes responsibility. They coordinate with the Secret Service. The information is fed into the command post, but those are Metropolitan Police officers, and they'll have Secret Service with them.
Well, we're watching a split-screen day. The 45th President of the United States in his armored limousine approaching the environs of the White House, and on the other side of the screen, the protests elsewhere in Washington. Police have been using flashbang concussion grenades on the crowd in order to disperse them. They've used pepper spray on the crowd, and what you're seeing in the background is the remnants of a fire Jeff Pegues was telling us about. Someone had set an automobile on fire. Jeff, what is happening now?
Well, Scott, they seem to have gotten this fire under control. Let's move over here. Tony Furlow is operating the camera for me. You can see through here, they're putting water on the smoke and flame, so they're trying to get the situation under control. And the good thing is the crowd has calmed down because you see this line of police officers here with their shields, some with pepper spray. But the situation has calmed down quite a bit. Scott?
Jeff Pegues reporting for us with our cameraman Tony Furlow there in the protests. There has been some damage in the city. We saw protesters with hammers smashing out windows earlier, but the police have been able to disperse these crowds fairly efficiently, and it doesn't seem that things have gotten too far out of hand during these protests around the periphery of the inaugural ceremonies. Jan Crawford is in the parade, and Jan, tell us where we are now. It looks to me like you're going by the Treasury, and you'll soon be making a left onto the pedestrian way in front of the White House.
That is right, Scott, and we are getting very close to making that left turn that will then be right where the White House is. And so you can hear they're announcing those who are coming up ahead. Smaller crowds are through here, though, as we're getting closer to the White House, Scott. But the president is back there somewhere. We can't see him as well right now, but it's still kind of toward the end of the parade. And he will then, of course, go and take his place in the reviewing stand and sit there and be able to watch what is going to be about 8,000 people in this parade, marching bands, members of the military, and assorted groups as they finish the parade in front of the White House, Scott.
And they're running about an hour late. The presidential limousine was supposed to arrive at the White House at 3:35 Eastern Time, and we're starting to close in on 4:30 at this point. So they'll be a little over an hour late by the time they get around there. There's been a very large reviewing stand built right in front of the White House, and that is where Donald Trump and the first family and the vice president and his family will be watching the rest of the parade go by. The bands and other performers that Jan Crawford was just telling us about. That's the presidential review stand there. As you can see, the White House in the background, the north lawn there behind, and the president will be watching from that stand as the parade unfolds. But certainly running late. As we see the presidential motorcade make that left turn back onto Pennsylvania Avenue in front of the White House, we want you to hear this program note that we have. Gayle King and John Dickerson are going to bring you a CBS News prime time special tonight called Change and Challenge, the inauguration of Donald Trump. That is tonight on CBS at 8 7 Central Time, and you won't want to miss that.
Do you want a stray thought?
I love a stray thought. Bob Woodward.
That Trump is not one who would be a person who keeps a diary. But wouldn't it be fascinating if he did, and if you know, what's inside, and if he sat down and said, these are the 3 things I want to accomplish. What are they, and what is the priorities? Because in a way, that's the way business people think. What do I want to accomplish? How do I make more money? How do I stabilize? So he's got...
The president's limousine has stopped. Secret Service is opening the door. He is nearly in front of the White House at this point on the part of Pennsylvania Avenue that's a pedestrian mall. So for the second time, he's stepping out with his young son, Barron. You get a sense of the doors on the limousine there and how incredibly thick they are. And there is the First Lady joining him, hand in hand. Joining us now is Dan Senior, who was an advisor to Paul Ryan when he was running for vice president on the Republican ticket. And Dan, I wonder what you thought of President Trump's inauguration speech. It certainly was different.
It was different. It was a sort of declaration a declaration of action against both parties. He ran for president against both parties. He effectively ran as an independent, but he sort of leased the Republican Party line. And what you heard today is he basically said, I've got an agenda, and I'm going to work to implement it, and I will turn my fire on whoever stands in the way, including many of the people who are standing standing right around him. Democrats, Republicans, it doesn't matter. So he's in this sort of improbable marriage with the congressional leadership right now, the Republican congressional leadership. They need him. They need him to get things they want done accomplished because he attracts political support that they don't have.
But he needs them.
He needs them. And look, he couldn't get tax reform done had Paul Ryan not been slaving away at the Ways and Means Committee for years. He probably wouldn't be able to get his first choice for the Supreme Court for Justice Scalia's successor in place had Mitch McConnell not done what he had done to prevent Obama's nominee from getting a vote. So he needs their expertise. That's what I mean. This is an improbable marriage.
Now it appears that the President, First Family are getting back in the limousine, but on the left-hand side of your screen, you see our correspondent Jeff Pegues at the site of that earlier protest, and I'm hearing the flashbang grenades going off again. Jeff, what do you see?
Well, Scott, this has deteriorated even more. I didn't think I'd be saying that, but that's what's happening here. People are ripping bricks off the cement, and then they're throwing them at the police officers. And the police officers are now responding. So
police officers mace and tear gas us.
So you're hearing both sides out here, but we see police responding to the protesters, and really, they aren't protesters. There are people in the crowd. They have masks on their faces. They're picking up the bricks and they're throwing them at the police officers who are now responding. The police over the last 15 minutes or so have been trying to clear this street to no avail. You can see all these people gathered in the street. We're on K Street between 14th and 13th. Thousands of people here, some covering their faces as a result of the pepper spray and the flashbangs, others with bricks in their hands. Some of these folks are throwing these bricks. Don't block our camera. Don't block our camera. Why are you throwing bricks? Don't block our camera.
What you see on the left-hand side of the screen is a car that the protesters set on fire right there. The fire department came, put the car out. The police have been trying to disperse the crowd with pepper spray, as Jeff Begay said, and these concussion grenades that are designed to make a loud noise, but also designed not to harm anyone. I should note that this protest, like the others, is distant from the festivities of the inauguration. This is several blocks away. It is not likely anyone who has come out to see the president has seen or heard anything like this. The National Mall and its environs have been locked down by the security services and made a safe zone for the inauguration to take place. Jeff Begay, if you can still hear me, what is happening where you are now?
But our self-interest also involves cooperating and collaborating with others.
Jeff Begay?
We're Americans. What's wrong?
Scott, can you hear me?
I hear you, Jeff. What are you seeing?
All right, now we're seeing a protest that has now developed all of a sudden. Police are standing back, and this crowd is gathered near police, and they're saying, hands up, don't shoot. Now we're being pushed back by police again. Over my shoulder, there's been pepper spray in the air trying to get the crowd to move back. And you just saw a brick. They're throwing bricks again at the police officers who are trying to protect themselves with their shields. So this goes back and forth. It's like an ebb and flow in this protest. You have people who are throwing bricks, and they move up and they start chanting again. So it's hard to tell minute to minute how this is going to change. And you're hearing bangs again here as well. But here's the thing, Scott. The crowd is not dispersing. It's getting bigger. It's not dispersing.
Jeff Begay's covering the protests a few blocks away from the presidential entourage. At this point, what we have in sum with these protests today is a number of smashed storefront windows. At least one car has been burned, and the Metropolitan Police have arrested about 100 people at this point, and a few police officers, judging from the video, have been injured. This is the inaugural parade. That is the review stand directly in front of the north face of the White House, and it looks like they have opened the doors of the limousine again, but I did not see the first family emerge. Jan Crawford, you are with the parade. Tell us what's happening there right now.
Well, as we're waiting for the president, the first lady, and the first family to take their places in the reviewing stand, the crowds, and you can hear the announcement, "Welcome home, Mr. President," as this crowd is, of course, very supportive, and you can hear the cheers as the president and the first lady review now right in front of their new home. I mean, as you said, there were reports of rain, but it's actually been quite nice. He was able to get out of the car twice. Once, of course, on Pennsylvania Avenue in front of the Justice Department, and then he got here on this plaza in front of Pennsylvania Avenue that runs in front of the White House. And you can hear the cheers as they continue down Pennsylvania Avenue.
As we watch the president, the first lady, and their young son, Barron, let's go to Margaret Brennan. Margaret?
Scott, as you watch the first family walk those last few yards to the gates to their new home, it's interesting to note that it's really only a few yards that the president has now been allowed to walk on foot. He's been getting in and out of that motorcade, as you mentioned. The security here obviously is very tight on Pennsylvania Avenue, as you would expect. But interesting, given how locked down it is, that he didn't walk the length of this less than half block between where I am and where the front door is. I will say, Scott, we don't know why. I can't get an answer, frankly, from security officials on the ground here as to why the bleachers behind me are empty. But immediately on this street behind me, next to the Treasury, there are about 5 lengths of bleachers that are empty right now. The crowds that you're seeing around the president are really gathered closer to the front gate of the White House, next to where the VIPs are sitting behind that bulletproof glass. So you haven't really been able to get the sense of a large crowd, but obviously the key VIPs are gathered and cheering him on right now. I did ask Tom Barrack, who is the chair of the inaugural committee, who really planned a lot of these festivities. I shouted out to him as he drove by, "How's it going? How do you feel about this, sir?" He gave me a thumbs up. He said, "This is all beautiful." So the man planning it is very happy. Again, don't know why we are seeing these empty bleachers here for a good half length of Pennsylvania Avenue, but we are seeing now the president towards the gates of the White House getting welcomed by so many of those individuals who helped plan this, and they really... The crowd pleaser, I have to say, appears to be the small children, Ivanka's children, who were being held by Jared Kushner, close advisor to the president, and others. So the kids are really the crowd pleaser, but really not everyone here got to see the length of that walk, Scott.
Margaret Brennan covering the parade for us. Margaret, thank you very much. You know, let me bring in the unique insight of Dan Sr., who was working in Baghdad for the George W. Bush administration as a senior advisor to the coalition there. Donald Trump today, Dan, said that he would wipe radical Islamic terrorism off the face of the earth, which would make him the third president now to say that.
Yeah.
What are some of the complexities?
Well, first of all, I think every president should be cautious about overpromising an inaugural address. He said he was going to wipe out violent Islamic extremism. He was going to eradicate crime from the streets of the United States. These are big challenges and high expectations to set. I think the biggest challenge he faces in this regard is it is very hard to wage any war against terrorism without alliances, traditional American alliances. I mean, think about what NATO did for America after September 11th. Think about how many nations were involved with us in Iraq. Think about the close working relationships we have in combating terrorism around the world. And the capitals of the traditional Western, American-led Western alliance system and parts of Asia are jittery right now. They are very worried that we are not going to be there. And you heard today, he did say, the president said in his inaugural address, we will stay true to old alliances, which is not nothing, which is important. He was trying to reassure, I think, our NATO allies. But he also said we're going to look at new alliances. Well, who are those new alliances? It sounds like it's probably Russia. That will make a lot of our traditional allies nervous. It's hard to do anything, let alone defeat radical Islam, on our own.
NATO has been fighting al-Qaeda in Afghanistan for 15 years. And yet Donald Trump says NATO is obsolete.
Yeah,
well, he doesn't see it as part of the war on terror.
Yeah, well, he, I think, believes that NATO exists to protect interests that don't matter to us. I mean, that is a growing view in the conservative movement. In fairness, it's not just Donald Trump. You are seeing this growing, school of thought that why is it in America's interest if Russia rolls into Estonia or Lithuania? What do we care about what happens in big parts of Western Europe? And so those questions are being raised by Donald Trump and others.
Dan Sr., Dan, thank you very much. Good to be with you. The presidential limousine now turning onto... Sorry, I'm just trying to make that out. That's the Eisenhower Executive Office Building.
17th Street. They're turning down.
What has always been known as the old Executive Office Building. Now they're turning there, and the parade is about an hour and 10 minutes late at this point. But we will be expecting the president to be getting out of the limousine with the first family and the vice president and taking their seats here at this reviewing stand to watch the rest of the parade as it proceeds through Washington. But it's getting to be 5 o'clock Eastern time, and sunset will not be too far away. So, Fran Townsend, they have gotten through the thing that makes you and all security people the most nervous.
That's exactly right. So the car is being brought around to the south gate where he'll go in the south gate entrance. It allows, in fairness, the first family now to have a moment to use the bathroom, to get blankets or sweaters or anything they want for their own comfort, and to freshen up before they come out into the reviewing stand.
They're entering the house for the first time as their house.
That's exactly right. And the staff, the remarkable thing, Scott, you mentioned it with Andy Card, is not only is the Oval Office been completely turned over and around, but also the residence has. And there's a professional, long-standing professional staff in the residence that will be sure that they have drinks and snacks for them and things waiting for them, and anything they might need before they go out to the reviewing stand.
Presidents come and go, but the White House staff is a constant in many respects.
And the residents in particular, they're really wonderful in taking care of the first family and the president's staff.
Bob Woodward, the president made a lot of promises in his inaugural address. He's got his work cut out for him.
He sure does, and where he kept saying, "I will never let you down." Who's the you? The implication was his voters, the American public, and so forth. But again, as I was saying earlier, he comes from that culture of overstatement, and for him to say he's going to wipe the Islamic State off the face of the earth is not surprising. As long as there's not a as Fran knows so well, another terrorist high casualty attack in this country, he's going to be fine. But that is the thing that gives you the lump in your stomach 24/7,
yeah,
doesn't
absolutely.
it?
We're joined now by John Dickerson, the anchor of Face the Nation, our CBS News political director. You know, John, it occurred to me as the parade rolled down Pennsylvania Avenue, it was a little bit of a microcosm of America. You had supporters and protesters, all the way down the street.
That's right. And in today's reaction to this speech, that you've been talking about, Donald Trump loves to keep the room engaged, loves to keep them up, and loves. I was talking to a Republican lawmaker this week who said, how are we in the boring making of legislation going to give him the things that he can go to rallies and get everybody still excited about? Well, he gave a speech to keep the crowd in front of him excited, but that other crowd, the crowd of people who are nervous about his presidency, are now, if his supporters are more excited, the others are more nervous.
And Bob Woodward, the president-elect comes into office, or I should call him the president, of course, since noon today. The president comes into office with the lowest approval rating of any president in modern times, about 35% in the CBS News poll, which is the lowest we've seen since we started asking that question in 1981.
Yeah, and that can go up and that can actually go down. He said in that speech, he said, this is the hour of action. And that is a very broad statement, and people are going to be asking, what are the acts? What are you going to do? And we are going to, in our business, I think very aggressively, hopefully fairly, chart all of those actions and try to measure the impact of them. But not just in terms of how does that correlate with his promise in the campaign, but what's the impact on people. I mean, he's made a big, he said to his supporters, you can count on me forever.
One of the greatest reporters Washington has ever seen, Bob Woodward of the Washington Post. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I just want to add, so he spoke to his supporters today, but a president does have
The tradition of an inaugural parade dates back to the very first inauguration, when President George Washington took the oath of office on April 30, 1789, in New York City. And he began his journey from Mount Vernon to New York City, local militia joined his procession as it passed through towns along the way. Once he arrived in New York City, members of the Continental Army, government officials, members of Congress, and prominent citizens escorted President Washington to Federal Hall for the swearing-in service.
Attention to ensure the security of the homeland?
So, I mean, I think he laid it out in his inaugural address, and this was the bold statement that he was going to put an end, if you will, to Islamic extremism. Certainly that's a threat. He didn't mention cyber, which I think is the other great threat of our time. And then there's the sort of geopolitical challenges, none of which he didn't mention the foreign policy stuff, Iran, North Korea, Russia, China. He stayed away from that in an effort, as John points out, to talk to his supporters and rally and reassure them.
Now, the president and the first family at this point are presumably in the White House, refreshing themselves before they come out to the reviewing stand for the parade. And Margaret Brennan is down there for us at this point. Margaret?
Scott, we're watching the vice president walk by. He's actually responding to some of the reporters, people shouting out to him. He is walking the stretch of Pennsylvania Avenue. You can see right now he's passing the empty bleachers, but getting close to that area where the VIPs are sitting. And what I can tell you is that the president himself, Donald Trump, once he gets inside the White House, he will have some downtime before he gets to parties tonight. We had been expecting a number of executive actions or orders, that swift action they had promised, to be happening today. But now we are hearing from Sean Spicer, the White House spokesperson, the new White House spokesperson, that a lot of those actions will likely be pushed off until Monday. Today, Donald Trump may look at a few things, he may review a few options, but he's likely going to wait before signing off on anything till Monday. So not the shock and awe in Washington that they promised immediately, but he's going to actually enjoy himself in this inaugural tonight, it sounds like. You can hear the crowd here on the ground. Mike Pence and his wife really getting a warm greeting from the revelers, and he really is responding to the cameras and responding to the people who are gathered here. Donald Trump did that swift movement back to his motorcade, not walking the stretch of Pennsylvania up to the front door. So they have a long and fun night ahead for them, but it sounds like a lot of this work will be pushed off until Monday, the first big day in the office for the Trump administration.
Margaret Brennan for us. Margaret, thank you very much. And we're joined again by Anthony Mason, who's been following the events of the day.
I'm struck, Scott, in watching Mike Pence. This is something I thought about earlier when we were talking about the new cabinet and the administration. Mike Pence, as vice president, has the lowest net worth of anybody in the new Trump administration. There are 5 billionaires in the senior administration. There are 5 former CEOs. These are, as Mr. Trump has said, very successful people. What did he say last night? I think he said that they have the highest IQ. We can't, I think, establish that.
He said they had collectively the highest IQ of any cabinet ever assembled.
Yeah, well, I don't think we can check that fact, but we can check the net worth of these guys, and it's somewhere up around $10 billion. So it's a pretty unusual bunch.
That suggests perhaps a high IQ.
Yeah, it might. It might. But Mike Pence, with his net worth is about $800,000, and that makes him the poorest man in the administration.
Now, the parade is supposed to wrap up in 25 minutes, and it hasn't begun yet. They are running more than an hour late, and now they are going to be pushing twilight here pretty soon. But here comes the parade following up the presidential limousine.
We talk about Mike Pence is going to be one of the busiest. Is going to be quite busy on Monday. He is charting a new role for the vice president. You know, they've always dealt with Congress, or at least Dick Cheney and Joe Biden did. But Mike Pence is dealing with Congress in a much more day-to-day